Hey everybody, my name is Jody Fletcher. And if you're watching this, it means that very soon we're going to do some work on EQI and leadership development. Now, I've got a little bit of good news and a little bit of bad news. The bad news is that there is some homework prior to us coming together in person. But the good news is that it's going to increase your self-awareness and better prepare you for the workshop. So what I'm going to do in just a second is share my screen and walk you through how to use the workbook and the report together. So with that, let's get started. Okay, we're going to get into this. On the left here, you see a workplace report, which is what most of you did as well. This one was donated by Jane Doe. She was kind enough to share her information with us. Anytime I think of that or hear Jane Doe, I always think of NCIS and all those other wonderful crime drama shows, right? And on the right over here, and we'll get into this in a minute, this is the workbook that I created to help you kind of go through this, and then we'll use it a fair bit once we get into the workshop. So this is the Reuben Baron model, and he was a psychologist, I think, that created this model in the 1980s. We're going to go through the 5 major competencies: self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal, decision-making, and stress management. And then we're going to get into the workbook a little bit here. So as we look at self-perception, I really just think of this as the voice in your head. It's kind of your inner self. It assesses feelings of inner strength and confidence. And then in the subcategory, there's 3 in each one of these major competencies. And in self-perception, we have self-regard, which is really knowing yourself, being comfortable and secure in who you are. And then self-actualization is the pursuit of meaning. It's the willingness to persistently try to improve yourself and engage in like personally relevant things. And then finally, in this category, we have emotional self-awareness, which is acknowledging your feelings and understanding where they come from. And the next competency, we have self-expression, which is an outward expression or the action component of self-perception. It's basically how you're emoting what you feel. And then after that, inside here, we have emotional expression, which is a constructive expression of your emotions. Assertiveness, which is communicating feelings and beliefs in a non-offensive way. And then independence, which is self-directed and free from emotional dependency. This is decision-making, planning, and daily tasks are completed autonomously. Then we're going to get into the interpersonal side. This is really, on its core level, how you interact with other humans. Within interpersonal, we have interpersonal relationships, which is the ability to build and maintain mutually satisfying relationships. Empathy, which is understanding and appreciating how others feel. And then social responsibility, which is kind of a social consciousness and how you contribute to the larger we. And I'm using my air quotes here, though you can't see me. After that, the next big competency we have is decision making. So how are you using your emotional information to make decisions? And this one involves problem solving, which is how you find solutions to the problems when emotions are involved. Reality testing, which is being objective and seeing things how they really are, what's kind of going on in the real world compared to what you may be feeling. And then impulse control is the ability to resist or delay impulses or the impulse to react based on an emotion. And then finally, we're going to round this out with stress management. So this is really about how you deal with the emotions associated with stress. And inside of stress management, we have flexibility, which is understanding emotions and adapting thoughts and behaviors. We have stress tolerance next, which is how you cope with stressful situations or difficult situations. And then optimism is the last one, which is an indicator of your positive attitude and outlook on life. This is not toxic positivity, but rather finding a constructive way to deal with the challenges and not spiraling into negativity or pessimism. All right. So next we're going to look at our manual here, and I want you to, I'm going to flip these pages real quick so you can see them. So I want you to get a basic idea, and you can go through and read these in a little more detail if you need to. But the idea is I want you to perform a self-assessment before you look at the results. So before you look at the next page on the report, I want you to do a self-assessment. Read these questions here and answer them. You can either answer them in this space provided or use a journal or another notepad. That is always very helpful. And then here are the worksheet instructions, but it's pretty simple. What I want you to do is kind of in this bubble here, write down what you consider your strengths to be. Now, this can be personally, professionally, or both, and then do the same as it applies to challenges. Next, I want you to go through each one of these competencies here, and you'll notice these are the ones that we just talked about over here. This is low, medium, and high. Now, don't worry about the numbers. That'll come into play a little bit later. But what I want you to do is just write down in this area an L, an M, or an H. So do you think that you're low, medium, or high in self-perception, self-regard, self-actualization, etc., as we've just discussed it? And then overall down here, do you think that your emotional intelligence is low, medium, or high? And then over here, under self-care, do you feel like you take care of yourself low, medium, or high? So I'm going to give you just a second to complete that task, and then we'll move on and give an example of the next couple pages, and then you'll be off to the races. The next thing we're going to do, although a lot of you probably cheated and looked ahead, is we're going to turn to page 3 in our reports, and we're going to actually look at our scores. So the idea behind having you, assess yourself before looking at this is to see how accurate you might be compared to what the report says. A lot of people get very concerned over the numbers. Please don't get concerned over the numbers. They merely mean that you use this behavior more or less, right? So down here, you got the low range. It's kind of in that 60 to 80 to 90 range. Mid range is, I guess, 90 to say 110-ish. And then the high range is 110 and over. But again, what we're looking for and what we use the numbers for more specifically are to look for imbalances. So if you look at Jane Doe here, her independence is 98. And if you were to compare that to assertiveness, it's 123. There's a gap of more than 10. So we would consider those to be out of balance. And that's something that we'll look at as we dig deeper into the workbook. There's also a very brief description here, unlike up here where they're a little bit longer. Here we've kind of pared it down. So the next thing we're going to do is get into the actual workbook itself after you've had a chance to kind of go over your score and give it a look. All right, let's get into the next piece of this. You'll notice that I'm still on page 3 in your report, and I've moved to page 3 in the workbook. That's because for the main competencies, self-perception, expression, interpersonal, etc., there's no corresponding page to that in your report. It goes straight to the subcategories. But I've created a page in your workbook to kind of help you dig into it a little bit more. And then we'll also use these during the workshop itself. What I would like you to do is start up here in the upper right-hand corner. In that area where you did the self-assessment, write down whether you put low, medium, or high. And then in the assessment here, you can write down your actual score. So Jane Doe would put in 116 right here. And let's say she rated herself as high. Then that's showing that she rated herself or she perceives herself kind of in the same way that the assessment does. Next thing we're going to do is basically in your own words, write down what self-perception means to you. So here's the actual definition. And in here, you'll remember I said it's kind of your inner self or the voice in your head. After that, you'll go down and you'll answer these questions right here, either using this workbook or in a separate notebook or journal. It's totally up to you. In each of these pages, and there'll be 5 of these, one for each of these areas here, you're going to have all the same areas of the page to fill out. So you'll have derailers, short-term actions, and long-term actions. As you think about this, what are some of the things that derail you from having a positive self-perception? So in this case, we'll just say that maybe Jane Doe's inner voice or the voice inside of her head is kind of a schoolyard bully and creates a lot of self-doubt. When that gets in the way, that could derail her from having a positive self-perception. So she might want to write those things down in here. Short-term actions, what are some of the short-term things she can do to face that challenge or to change that behavior. And then the long-term action is the longer, term. In this case, maybe she wants to build a better relationship with the voice in her head. So in the short-term actions, this is where, and we'll get into this a little bit more later, she might enlist some reality testing and ask herself, is what's going on inside of my head objectively true, or is it just the story that that bully that lives inside of my head is telling me? So you'll do this for each of these major categories, and we're just going to go through one so that you kind of get the idea, and then you can, be off to the races on your own. You can also leave a lot of space in the derailers, short-term and long-term actions, because as we get into this in the classroom, you might discover some other things that people have, discovered on their own that you had not thought about. So you can leave some room to put those in there as well. You'll notice I'm still on page 3 of your report, though I've changed to page 4 in your workbook, self-regard. This is so that you can kind of knock out 2 things at once. First, write down your self-score again, low, medium, or high, and then the assessment score. So self-regard, come over here, self-regard. Jane Doe was 113, so you would write down 113 here. Next, we're going to look at balancers. So this is where I want you to write down these scores. Self-actualization, you come over here and you find it. So here it would be 119. Problem solving. Problem solving is going to be down here in decision making. So again, that's 113. And then reality testing is also in decision making, and that's 124. Write those scores down while you've still got this page up. That'll keep you from having to flip back and forth. And then go ahead and turn to page 4 in your report. You'll see that it looks like a bad high school study session here. I've highlighted a lot of things that's to keep me on track. You're going to want to give yourself a good 10 or 15 minutes to read this, and I highly recommend you do it with a highlighter or a red pen or whatever it is that you do to kind of note things that stand out to you. But we're going to read this in its entirety and then fill this page in on your workbook. And again, every page in the workbook for all of the subcategories have the same components. They look different just for aesthetics, but they all have the same components. So we're going to start off by writing it in your own words, what self-regard means to you. And then if you look at the report here, it says, Jane, your results suggest that your self-regard is stronger than most people's, a high level of respect for yourself, your talents and your weaknesses, a willingness to confidently admit mistakes or unfamiliarity with the situation. The impact at work. The potential challenge is that you could lose touch with objective assessments of your capabilities, draw on reality testing behaviors to maintain a healthy perception. So here's what I'm talking about. This is the potential challenges area. So as you read through this, you're looking for things that could throw you off on your self-regard, potential challenges. In this case, it could be that you lose touch with objective assessment, meaning you're overconfident. And then a balancer is to draw on reality testing behaviors to maintain a healthy self-perception. So down here in balancing actions, you could say draw on, reality testing, or in your words, whatever that means to you. And you'll notice that reality testing up here is also one of the balancers that it's measured against. Well, I've left a section here for you to fill in notes as well. This social and behavioral implications. So here it's emotional, and then here it's social and behavioral. Often perceived by others as confidence. People may frequently gravitate towards you to look to you for advice and seek your leadership. It's important to seek out opportunities that stretch our less developed skills as well. Avoid potential negative consequences of overly high self-regard. Use empathy and appropriate level of self-assertiveness to avoid appearing overconfident. Again, these could be some of the potential challenges. Everything else in here you could fill in as strengths, right? So you're confident, you are able to admit mistakes, and whatever this means to you. This is not necessarily off the report, but it's what you're pulling from the report, what it means to you. Strategies for actions. So again, this kind of goes down here, either in the notes or the balancing actions, whatever you feel is best. Seeking others' feedback on your strengths and weaknesses. So really you're looking for somebody who you trust to comment on your strengths and your weaknesses Ask them to list them maybe, and then look for disconnects and similarities as you build your own list of what your strengths and weaknesses are. And then obviously own up to your weaknesses. Although challenging, openly admitting your weakness can help you keep your self-regard in check with how your colleagues see you. So these are all balancing actions. They could be potential challenges. It's really just how you interpret this. But I want you to break it down into challenges, strengths, balancing actions, things that you can do to balance out. And then as we look at the balancers here, they're down here on the report. This section compares self-regard with self-actualization over here, problem solving, and reality testing. Now, remember I said before, when we look at those numbers, we're looking for something that's out of balance. So down here, it says your self-regard is lower than your reality testing. It's 113 to 124. So it just barely tips the scale because the number we're looking for is to be within 10. And then it gives you some ideas here. And balancing these two areas, remember that although input from external sources is important, self-regard is about your own subjective evaluation of self-worth, etc. So as you look for things that are out of balance, this is also going to be an area that is going to help you build balancing actions, or the ability to say, if I'm getting overconfident, I can pull in reality testing to ask myself, do I really have the skill set to deal with this? Or am I just so confident I think everything's going to work out fine? All right, that is pretty much the nuts and bolts of how you're going to go through every one of these pages. So the next would be self-actualization. Here you see self-actualization. It has all of the same areas that we had in self-regard. They just look a little different for aesthetics. So you're going to go through, fill this area out, fill these out using page 3 in your report, and then just kind of dig into every one of these pages for your report. What I highly recommend is that you give yourself about 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes per section. I would say probably 15 to 20. So allocate an hour for each one of these. Self-perception, that's page, and then self-regard, self-actualization, and emotional self-awareness. Give yourself about an hour to complete each one of these 5 areas. If you do that, I would also recommend you not try to do them all at once and break them up into several different nights. Maybe tackle one per night. Now on to the final section. And if you've made it this far, congratulations. It means you've done all of your other homework, and we're in the last little bit that you've got to do on your own. Now you can read these instructions here. This is page 23 in your workbooks, but if you scroll down to page 24, this is where I want you to do the actual work. Something that I've found to be very effective with clients is if they personify the voice in their head, because really it's the one thing, we're going to talk about this a fair bit in the workshop, but it's the one thing, person, whatever you want to call it, that we can't get away from. And it knows all of our deepest, darkest secrets. It knows exactly what button to push. And you can't just turn it off. I've seen some people say, well, just ignore it. And really, you can't. The idea, in my mind, is to build the type of relationship that you want to have with the voice in your head. And that's why you see, I'm a child of born in the 70s and raised in the 80s. So in my mind, the voice in my head looks kind of like this. It's I'm a giant robot, and this is probably the voice you're hearing. And then this is the voice in my head as the co-pilot. And I want to have a great relationship with that co-pilot. Of course, sometimes it can be a bully. Sometimes it can be a coach. It can be many different things. But what I want you to do down here is to, either in words or pictures or whatever works for you, personify what the voice in your head is like the most. What type of personality does it have the most? And then, what type of relationship do you want to build with it compared to the type of relationship that you have with it currently? And it's not all bad. Some people are like, I've got a great relationship with the voice in my head. That's awesome. And if you want to make it even better, what does that look like? So I find that a lot of clients really love doing this. If it's not your thing, it's not the end of the world. Don't worry about it. But if you're into it, fill out page 24 and use the instructions here on page 23. So that video was about 5 times longer than I wanted it to be. But the reality is you need to have a basic understanding for that workbook to really be effective and meaningful to you, as well as the report. So I apologize for the length, but we're not going to have a ton of time to get into what I did in this video, nor for you to really spend the time that I want you to spend with this assessment and the report. So I highly encourage you to give yourself a good 5 or 6 hours, spread it out over a week or two, and really dig into that workbook and the report and answer all those questions. Look for things that resonate with you. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. Those are the truths that we have to tell ourselves, and bring all of that information to class so that when we all get there together and we start digging into all this stuff, you're ready to get into breakout groups and really explore it even further. I hope that you find whenever we come together, you're going to be able to pull from your classmates a lot of information that maybe they discovered that you haven't thought of as well. And then it really just it makes for such a better experience. So please, please, please do your homework. And I look so forward to seeing you at the workshop. Have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you real soon.